Hey Matt,
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty cool. I'm excited about for today's show because the question today it's kind of cool.
hmm And useful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is actually that's one of the most important stuff about the question today. So, okay, here's the questions for today. So, what if we ask questions we think unsolvable instead the ones we think can be solved? So
hmm
that's a hard one, and let me tell you why I
Yeah, I'm curious.
yeah, and the why of this question. I was over the last week. I was reading this book. The name of the book is "Sapiens," as a
Yeah.
book about the human history. This actually is "Sapiens: A Brief History of Humanity."
Yeah.
That's the name of the book, and I think it's something between chapter 3 and chapter 4.
hmm
And the author make this claim, and and she says that usually scholars tend to ask questions
hmm
that they think have a large probability of being solved, of course,
hmm
because this is one of the restrictions. Yeah, when you're a scholar and you're writing papers,
Yeah.
uh, if you ask a question that at the end of the experiment you cannot solve the question, actually you don't have a paper. But beyond that, I was thinking, oh, wow, this is so powerful, and I was doing this like this review in my personal lifetime, and going deeper in the I would say in my personal history. I want to be brutally honest. I have to admit that usually I'm that kind of guy, and I would say most of the time,
hmm
and making questions or asking questions that for some reason you think you will be able to find the answer. And like I don't know, 5 days ago, I just say, okay, but what if we ask questions
hmm
that we think with
hmm
the tools that we have today are unsolvable, instead the ones that we think can be solved? And I was just making this personal experiment
Yeah.
over the week, and I came up with different questions just for my personal stand. And I was like, okay, question that I don't know, that I think is unsolvable question, no, that is
hmm
totally different. And I think, for example, let's how big is the universe? I personally I think it's unsolvable. I don't know if I'd be able to solve, but I personally, in my beliefs, I
Yeah.
think it's an unsolvable question. Another unsolvable question, I think, is how to defeat uh, cancer for good.
hmm
I think it's unsolvable because when I when you go and you read about what is cancer, and you know that cancer basically is the diminishing power of your own cells in your body, and I think it's unsolvable one. Another one that I think is what if for some reason, mm, today or maybe someday in the future, uh, we lose control of we totally lose control of economy. For example, I don't
hmm
know, some data breach in
hmm
the stock exchange around the world, and we for some reason we totally lost control on that stuff.
hmm
And the last one, yes, I don't want to take all the time.
No, no,
And the
no, no.
last one was something like, okay, what if, and this is something that is a personal thing in my own life.
hmm
Uh, what if I know for sure the date of my death, of when I'm dying? What if
Mhm.
I know for sure when and what time I'll die? And everybody actually knows the exact date that
Mhm.
life will expire.
Mhm.
Um, it's unsolvable, of course, but oh my God, I was trying to devise how to approach the questions, and I don't know, it's so exciting. It's so
Yeah.
exciting the way the brain starts to work, that I say, oh my God, this has to be one of the next shows, Matt. So what do you think?
I think a lot.
Yeah,
There's
I
so
took a
many, I
lot of
agree.
time as well.
Definitely has to be more shows than this.
Yeah.
And also, I'll tell you why I'm kind of smiling now, and also why I responded so quickly when you first asked this. There's a lot, but I don't want to go too far off on either of those tangents, because what you brought up here is new stuff, and as always, I'm sketching down new thoughts, so I'm going to try to build on this. But what you're talking about here, but I hope we revisit this in the future. And part of the reason is because I've been playing with this idea in the past, right? So one of the reasons I'm smiling is something that you just said here that I had heard for the first time, was scholars ask questions that have a high probability of being solved. And I never heard it phrased that way, but you know a lot about, my history and what if and all of this, but I don't think you know that what if was created on a university campus while I was a full professor, not by accident. And in fact, we created it. And Andrew, R. McHugh, I think from the day as well. Like in our early, he was a student and I was a professor, and I was a new professor. So I was still very much in observation mode, and even like, do I fit in mode kind of stuff. But one of the early frustrations I had with working in higher ed was, I never had the words for it until you just said this, was that I thought I was getting to higher eds. Like, this is what I worked my whole life for. This is like the golden chalice, where all of these things about thinking these ways and doing these things, and not just talking progressively, but actually being progressive. And everything we do that's where it all happens. And then you peek behind the curtain and you go, oh no, this is just industry, right? This is just the same things that plague other industries or sectors are here. And I didn't realize, I was naive, but one of the things we intentionally created the what if conferences, the what if, was to avoid this. We wanted to not have a high probability of your presentation being solved. We wanted to have a zero probability, right? So we intentionally asked to ask questions that either cannot be answered or haven't been answered yet, because we always kind of want to lead that kind of dangling, that dangling kind of carrot of I was going to say motivation, but momentum, right? And I bring that up, if I could even circle back, because if I was listening to you correctly, if you were one of my clients talking about like, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I want to solve cancer, or cure cancer. I would want the early stages we'd be drilling down into that problem and trying to understand, all right, because what you said is so true. Like, if you just look at cancer, like, it's impossible, right? But again, like with the what if, this curiosity-based thinking and stuff, what we do is like, all right, well, where's the real, what if the problem is somewhere else? What if there's an entry point? And one of the things I think, just hypothetically, that we might, get to pretty quickly is, it's not really cancer that you're trying to cure. It's death you're trying to prevent, which is not only a deeper question, and then that's what I was smiling, because I like, you kind of brought that up kind of like at the end there. That's what you wrapped it up about, right? And the idea is, well, what if we can't solve the problem of death, right? And not only is that not a problem, but look at some of the biggest, what the biggest innovators who today are doing? I think some publicly and probably some not so publicly. Like, was it Ray Kurzweil? Is that the right? I think it's Ray Kurzweil. No, Mitko, the Japanese physicist. He's working to bring his father. He's trying to solve the issue of death. Like, his entire motivation is about bringing his father to see his dead father again, right? And the idea is that he may never accomplish that, but the breadcrumbs along the way, right? What he's accomplished, what he's leaving behind, what may not seem important to him because he's trying to solve this issue, is all of these huge things. And the idea is like, that's not just true to, these world famous physicists and everything else. And at large, I mean, that's true for any individual, any endeavor. And now why I'm really smiling too is like, don't forget, I'm an English major. Like, so I was teaching English literature in my backgrounds, and one of my favorite poems from again when I was 19 years old, right? Is Robert Browning, and it's a poem by the name of Andrea del Sarto. And Andrea del Sarto was an Italian Renaissance painter and all of this. But and it's a long poem, so like you read it if you want to, but you only need to remember these two lines, and the lines are but man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? And it's this idea that you should always be trying to grab more, you should always be grasping, reaching for more than what you can physically reach, or what's a heaven for, right? And you could put in all these different contexts. In this case, he was talking about a younger lady he loved, like his girlfriend loved him, and he was like older and she shouldn't, but like he's like, I'm always trying for something better. But as a painter, he was always talking about like, I need to take chances. I need to go beyond my skills and my abilities. And it's just one of those, sometimes like, in a long poem, sometimes it's just two lines that stick with you. And it's one of those things that those two lines have been with me since I was like 19. And when you mentioned, and part of the motivation behind what if, like, how do we, what if a man's reach should exceed his grasp, right? That's always been kind of a motivator for me. And even framing those questions is like, how do we go beyond, we talk about getting outside the box, is we've got to put these guideposts, we've got to put our targets farther than what we can conceivably reach, or ask questions that cannot possibly be answered, because the goal isn't getting the answer, it's what you find along the way, right? And a lot of times people tell you that, like life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. All right, cool. That sounds good, but how do you do it? And I think what you're tapping into here is how you do just that. Right? How you can do that more intentionally, how by going into the, not just the unknown, but the unanswerable, and then be aware of what you find along the way before you get to an unanswerable response.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And on top of that, this is I think it's a powerful idea, and this is something so powerful that we can use in our daily basis with our students, with our customers, with our employees, and with our partners. Just to give you some example. Let's go to the classroom. Yeah. Actually, the layout that we have here is a classroom.
Well, we're just doing some poetry lessons, so now we'll move to the next subject. Then.
Yeah. Usually, let's use a cliche question. Mm-hmm. Who was the discoverer of America?
Yeah, well,
that's that common question on a classroom, and the traditional way. Mm-hmm. Or 8 times 7. Mm-hmm. That's a common question in the class at the classroom. But if you're a professor, and this is something that we know, I know, Matt knows for experience, that when you ask that type of questions, and when the students get used to this type of questions, the problem in the future is that you think that you will have to have the answer to everything. Mm-hmm. And that creates some kind of actually problems in the real life, because you won't have the answer to every single question. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing this question, okay, who was the discoverer of America? You can ask some question of what time of the day actually Christopher Columbus hit the floor for the first time. Mm-hmm. Or what song were the Native Americans playing when Christopher Columbus arrived to the beach?
Yeah.
Or this type of question, and instead of asking 7 times 8, mm-hmm. Some type of question of what's the number of stars in a cloudy night? Mm-hmm. How do you know how many drops of water you need to fill a pool? Mm. something like that. And that actually you think is unsolvable, but as you said before, it's about the process.
Mhm.
And maybe, and that's the beautiful thing about the curiosity,
Yeah.
you will get excited about the question, and you will get your students so excited about the
Mhm.
questions that the curiosity itself will generate different processes,
Mhm.
different way of thinking, and a thinking based on the curiosity, a curiosity based thinking
Yeah.
that the trouble, maybe, maybe I won't find the question, the right answer, but your students will be able to create things
Mhm.
from the stand where they are.
Yeah.
And same stuff with your employees. Um, in this situation that we are, how do we improve sales? Okay,
Mhm.
that's the paper book. That's the book.
Yeah.
That's going by the book.
Yeah.
No, it's not about that. It's um, how do we change? We totally change the company
Mhm.
in a way that we don't need to get worried again in the future,
Mhm.
about sales.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe no, this is not okay. If all the people is saying no, that's impossible, that's the question.
Yeah.
And
That's
let's
going.
work, yeah, that's the question, and then let's work through it.
Mhm.
And I think, actually curiosity is not about getting the answer, as
Oh,
you
not
said.
at all. Yeah.
Actually, it's not about the answer, it's about the process. Of course, we are professors.
Yeah.
uh, and the reason of these videos actually is to give you tools to create those questions, you know.
Mhm.
um, and I think this topic is so powerful, and that if you think in terms of unsolvable questions instead of thinking about solvable questions,
Mhm.
you will have a better experience with your students and with your employees and with your partners and even with your family. And sometimes that's the kind of thinking.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I like this, and I'm also smiling because sometimes when I work with engineers, we talk about curiosity as a measure of entropy, right? You're
Yeah.
trying to measure it's a measurement of the unknown, really, because if you're curious, it's something you don't know yet, right? But you also know entropy. We oftentimes think of it as being chaotic, but really it's just energy. It's untapped energy or untapped potential, right? You can never get there unless I mean, how do you look for the unknown, or how do you look for, right? Unless you're asking the impossible. That's what I love about this question so much, and it takes a while, maybe, but I believe it can be a habit forming. But once you get used to setting your sights again beyond your grasp, beyond your reach, then you'll have better outcomes. And it's funny because you'll have better outcomes technically through failure, right? Because
Mhm.
you're not finding an answer to your question, so you're technically failing over and over. But we talk about this all the time, right? But that's okay. What are you learning? You're setting yourself up for failure. Sounds counterintuitive, but if you do it by design, if we've talked about intention in these, I've been listening to some past broadcasts we've done, but when you talk about this intentionality as well, you can get different experiences and different outcomes from it.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I totally. And if you think, for example, as we used to do in these shows at the end of the show,
Yeah.
let's go. Let's move to the business side of
Hmm.
these tools that we are providing to you. And we think in terms of Bell, Alexander Graham Bell.
Yeah.
At that time, it's somebody was asking about creating a light bulb. That's unsolvable.
Yeah.
That's impossible. And everybody have heard a story about, I don't know, thousands of the different experiments, and at the end one, oh my god, works. But for sure, you know thousands of different forms of how to not to do a light bulb, and that's the thing, you know.
Mhm.
Is asking questions that you think are unsolvable. But the beautiful thing is at some point
Mhm.
in the future, by design, you know, we don't know when. We don't know if maybe if in the next generation, if it is in our lifespan,
Yeah.
we don't know. But at some point in the future, will be solvable
Mhm.
or,
Mhm.
or will be solved. And now you have to create another one. And
Mm.
that's the beauty about these tools is that it's a tool that can evolve. You know,
Mhm.
you can evolve with the tool because at some point, oh my God, 2 years ago, I think this was an unsolvable stuff.
Yeah.
I know now that it's a solvable one. Maybe you are the guy who will find the solution, or
Mhm.
maybe you are the guy who will be saying, no, 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 let's move to the next one. But because I know that humankind will be able to solve this one, and now you can move to the next one. You choose, you know, and that's why it's so powerful. This question.
Oh yeah. No, and the entire process of going to the moon
Oh
was
yeah,
a process of unsolvable problem, questions, right? Because if you really, and there's no way to truly chart when, how long ago humans have been trying to get to the moon, but it wasn't like they started in the 1950s and got there in the 1960s, right? They had been thinking and then just think for how long of human history they've known about the moon, but it was an impossible question, right? It is an impossible. And then now today we look at like all these, it's interesting how easy we are to admire people, but how hard it is to mimic them, right?
yeah,
And I'm not throwing shade. I'm not being critical. So I think there's too much criticism being thrown at these billionaires, like Elon Musk and Richard Branson and all this. Like, they go to outer space, and like all these people are like, oh, well, why aren't they doing this or billion, blah blah blah. And it's one of those things, though. But if you look at it, it is fascinating that we look at this and then we judge them based on like if they're going to the moon or they're going to Mars and everything else. But it's undeniable that they're successful business people, right? It's undeniable that they're leading innovators in our lifetimes. It's all these things are. It's honestly, it's also pretty undeniable that generally people like them more or less. The people who know them, not the people who know them in 150 characters or less, but all these things that whether we personally choose to like them or not. And if you look at them, one of the most fundamental things that they do is they shoot for the impossible constantly, right? And if there's something that we could mimic, not or take away not just from this conversation, but look in the real world, is look at these people, whether it's Richard Branson or it's Elon Musk going outer space, or it's Walt Disney going from the small town of Missouri to whatever Disney is today, or whether it's this revolution or that product, whatever else. If you really study them, I think it'd be interesting to see how many of them have in common this very concept that you're bringing up here, that they're all shooting for something. They're all aiming for something that is impossible. And they just have all the success along the way, right? And it's weird that I think that's something like, again, it's very difficult to be an Elon Musk or a Walt Disney or whomever, but I think it is pretty simple to start again as an individual or as an organization or a company. Like even if you're just a small business in a local community, what if you I just blogged about something today. What if you make your own wow, right? What if you say this is something pretty amazing that if we did this, boom, wow, it would be amazing if we would be known for this. It doesn't have to be related to your day-to-day product or work or service, right? Just something that would be kind of crazy or kind of impossible, and you just made a statement. And it could be a way to motivate your workers, right? To keep them, it could be a way to motivate or increase brand loyalty. I mean, you could use this for other ways, right? Because when you make an audacious statement like this, when you claim or try to solve for or go to somewhere that's impossible, it attracts people. Right? Now, a lot of them may want to point and say you're crazy, but you get attention, right? And it's interesting how many crazy people find other crazy, passionate, crazy people. And if we, as not just innovators, but like what you're saying before, as marketers or as employers, as team leaders, as organizations, if we can maybe use this concept as a way to do other things, I'd be really curious to see what we. Again, we're gonna have more discussions on this, I hope. But it's interesting just to think of how many different ways we could apply this simple question.
Yeah, I do agree with you that this question and the topic that we are discussing today is a topic for, of course, more than just one show. It can be expanded to, I think, at least 5 different shows in order to devise this question. And I will say not perfectly, but at least we can go deeper. First question is okay. We have Diana Lorena Rubio. So pose right question is a big challenge for the students and teachers. Yeah. What do you think, Matt? Yes, no, it's so hard. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Thank you for this comment, because I think one of the challenges both for students and sometimes teachers is we filter out or we edit our questions because we think, oh, can I find an answer, right? Can I solve? And if we throw because we can be embarrassed, right? If you ask a question and it's like, oh, that's stupid. Everybody's afraid of asking a dumb question or a stupid question. But if we can establish that from the beginning, hey, we're going to ask impossible questions, right? If you completely flip it and somebody asks a question that is solvable, you not laugh, but you point at them and go, oh, we can solve that. Ask something crazier. I think what that does then is it allows for the the culture, the attitude to start asking more and more. It becomes contagious. So this is a great point, but I think we can overcome that challenge by making it clear at the beginning that we want impossible questions.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard, because it's about the exposure in front of our students, and that's a beautiful question here from Jay Sparks, and he said, "Doesn't the Japanese Zen tradition use the idea of kon?" I don't know how to pronounce kon. I'm sorry. Which is a nonsensical, unsolvable riddle to pose the brain of a practitioner to get them out of traditional thinking. Yeah, that's another example.
I'd never heard. This is the first time. Thank you, Jay. This is
that's another example. And it's about it's about tradition. It's about the Japanese. When you go to these type of cultures, you are challenging. You are creating permanent challenge to the traditions, but not the tradition. I'll say, and the human and the social environment, but in the traditional thinking. That's how you create new ideas. And when you think, for example, just moving a little back in today's presentation, and the travel to the moon, and it was this author in 1860s, 1850, 1878, that maybe everybody will be so familiar with this guy that is Jules Verne, Jules Verne. And it was a book, that the name of the book was From the Earth to the Moon. Of course, when you are saying that today, it's a scientific book. But when you are writing this book in 1865, it's a science fiction. It's science fiction, or is maybe it's I don't know what's the exact term, but it's something that is fantasy. But at some point, it's impossible. But at some point, this fantasy book in 1865 becomes a reality 100 and something years later. And that's from the root of asking questions that you think that are unsolvable. And the good thing, and how to approach to this stuff. Maybe somebody will say you, and that's a normal stuff. That's the way of life. Somebody will say, oh, that's impossible. That's pure fiction and that's fantasy. And you say, okay,
Hmm.
I never thought that way. And maybe I'm a fantasy writer. I'm a fantasy guy. But I can be assured, and I can assure you that in the future, these fantasies will be a reality. But today, yes, maybe you are right. I'm a fantasy guy. And that's the type of guys that if you are the professor, just be the fantasy guy, be
Yeah.
the science fiction person, because when you are working with students, when you are working with people, as a professor, as a business leader, as a boss, as a partner, your role actually is not to have or not to get to the final answer, but to explore the process, to improve the curiosity in the way of thinking. My God, that's so powerful, Matt. I love this topic.
Yeah, this is yeah. I hope we keep exploring this. This is yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Oh my God, it's half an hour today. Yeah,
Say
time
more
flies.
later. Yeah.
Time flies. So I think we have some ideas for next shows. Of course, thank you so much to Diana, and
Yeah.
Jay
Yeah.
for
Great seeing both.
great
Yeah.
comments. Great to see you guys, and of course, don't hesitate to send us an email or contact Matt, of course, or me via email. We'll be more than happy to share with you more experiences. And of course, see you next Friday. We have more chapters here on the YouTube channel, on the Facebook page. Of course, get sure that you are subscribed and don't lose another show, of course.
Have a great weekend and see you again next week.
Yeah, you too, Matt, of course. Thank you so much.
See ya.
See you.